Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. Ethan Miller was a man of simple desires. All he wanted was a carefree life, a loving wife, children, a cozy home, and a few toys to enjoy. He drove the Ford F.150 his father had left him when he passed away a decade ago. The truck was already 15 years old by then. His father had been a carpenter and a farmer, while his mother worked as a maid at a hotel just outside of Bells, Tennessee. Ethan grew up in Bells, a small town so tiny that when you saw the Welcome to Bells sign, the back of it said, "Thanks for visiting." He attended every school in town, Bells Elementary, Middle, High School, and Mini-Mart, since they were all housed in the same building. The only thing that kept him from being bullied was his sister, Sarah. Her boyfriend was the local tough guy, and anyone who messed with Sarah's brother quickly learned they were off limits. But like I said, Ethan wanted nothing more than a simple life. School was fine for him. He had a few friends, a girlfriend, and a beat-up car, a bucket that took him where he needed to go, maybe to see if he could get it fixed up. His real talent, though, was hunting. Ethan had a gun in his hands as soon as he could walk while stumbled, but you get the idea, and it didn't matter if it was just a cap gun. So when the Army recruiter came through town, he convinced Ethan to join and become an Army Ranger. Ethan's dad wasn't pleased, but he understood that Ethan needed to make his own path in life. After graduation, Ethan joined the Army. He was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. When the drill sergeant first saw Ethan, he told him, "Get back on the bus and go home. Ranger school is for grown-ups, not little boys." Ethan was a little over 5 feet, 7 inches, and weighed about $150. But it didn't faze Ethan. He was used to people underestimating him. After the first night in the field, the drill sergeant never underestimated Ethan again. The drill sergeant thought he would sneak up on Ethan, but instead, he ended up looking down the business end of Ethan's M16. It was 3 a.m., and Ethan was the only one who heard the drill sergeant moving around in the woods. By the end of Ranger School, Ethan was ranked first in his class. Ethan did his parents proud. Time marches on, and by the end of Ethan's enlistment, he had seen some action. Ethan was sent on missions that left you wondering just where in the hell he had been. But Ethan just kept to himself and never told anyone anything. While at his last duty station, Ethan had gotten a degree in accounting in his off time. That's where he met Lily. Lily was a very good-looking woman. She was about 5 feet, 2 inches, 103 pounds, with auburn hair and hazel eyes. Lily turned heads wherever she went. Lily was hot and she knew it. Lily was offered the moon by everyone on the base and in the town. But Lily was looking for a certain type of man. Quiet, easygoing, and, last but not least, someone she could control. When Lily met Ethan, she knew she had found the perfect mate. The only problem was Ethan knew she was out of his league and acted accordingly. When Lily would smile at Ethan, he would look away. When Lily would walk toward Ethan, he would walk away. Finally, one day, Ethan was in the chapel waiting on Saturday, Massachusetts. When Lily saw Ethan, she knew she had to move fast to catch him before he saw her. Lily sat down on the pew behind Ethan, and before she could tap him on the shoulder, Ethan said, "Yes, what can I do for you?" That threw Lily off a little because she didn't realize that he knew she was there. Once Lily smiled, Ethan's heart melted, and that was it. That was all it took for their romance to start. From that moment on, they were a couple. When Ethan took Lily home to meet his family, they were in awe. Lily had her MBA, she was first in her class, and she also spoke 4 languages. In Bells, the whole town wondered how Ethan got so lucky. Remember, Bells is a very small town. Ethan's dad was happy for his son, but told him, "Keep an eye out. Son, when you have a woman like that, you always have to keep your eye on the prize. Be sure you treat her right and love her as she needs, but don't ever let her disrespect you. It's okay to let her have her way as long as you don't give her everything. You have to stand up sometimes and say no." Ethan made a promise to his dad that day, and he always kept his promises. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, it was 10 years down the road. Ethan had a nice little auditing business, and Lily was a mid-level sales executive for a major department store. They had no kids and were the perfect little married couple. Things were going great as far as Ethan was concerned. Ethan had just finished an audit on a client's factory when he decided to stop by Lily's office and see if she wanted to go to lunch. Ethan had never been to Lily's office before. He never wanted to interfere with her at work. Likewise, she had never called him at his office either. She would call him or leave him a message at home to tell him if she was going to be late. Once he found where Lily's office was located, he walked up to her secretary, whose desk sat outside the office, off of the corridor. "Who are you?" Lily's secretary asked him when he stopped in front of her desk. "I'm Lily's husband," he informed her. She laughed and told him just move right on. Lily's husband is 6 feet, 3 inches, blonde, good-looking, and works upstairs. "Could you just buzz Mrs. Harris right now? I'm sure we can get this straightened out." Instead, the secretary called security. When the security men got there, they grabbed Ethan to escort him out of the facility. Right at that moment, Lily, not knowing that her real husband was being treated as if he were some sort of nut job, walked out of her office, holding hands with the same guy the secretary had described. Lily was in shock, but she didn't say or do a thing as Ethan was led away. Lily never thought Ethan would ever find out about her and her boyfriend, Mark. She and Mark had everyone at work convinced they were married, but now things had gotten out of hand. As soon as Ethan was escorted out of the building, he headed directly home to pack his things. Ethan was crushed, but he also was a realist. Ethan knew that Lily's affair had to be a long-term thing. If the people at work thought she was married to the guy, it had to have been going on for a while. On the drive home, his phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Lily's cell phone. He didn't answer it, but it just kept ringing. Ethan threw the phone out of the window and kept driving. Once he arrived home, he started packing and thinking. Ethan finally realized why Lily didn't want kids. Well, not his anyway. He was saddened by the thought, but it didn't really change anything. He had made a fool out of him, and he wouldn't live with that. Can you imagine it? Lily's secretary told her that bland little nothing of a guy came right up to me and claimed he was your husband. That guy was delusional. They laughed at the thought of Lily with Ethan. I don't know what to say. I don't mean to brag, but honestly, in his dreams Lily agreed. It occurred to Lily that she had always felt that she was out of Ethan's league. After all, Ethan was a simpleton and he had served his purpose. Lily finished out the rest of the day at work and headed home. She didn't have any idea of what to do. She had screwed up and now knew what was going on. But she was convinced that Ethan would listen to her and she could think up some kind of lie that he would accept. When she pulled in, Ethan's car was sitting in its normal spot. Lily opened the door and called out for Ethan. Nothing. It was eerily silent. Lily looked all over the house. Ethan was gone. But Lily didn't cry. She didn't think about it twice. In her eyes, Ethan had served his purpose and now it was on to bigger, better things. She was actually glad that she didn't have to explain the reality of the situation to him. 2 weeks later, while she was out to lunch with Mark, her work husband, and a couple of the company's VPs, a man dressed like a waiter walked up to her. "Are you Lily Harris?" asked the man impersonating a waiter. "Yes," she responded, curious but not especially worried. The man handed her a package and said, "You've been served." Lily turned bright red, grabbed the envelope and ran for the ladies' room. Lily was pissed. How could Ethan have done this so fast? And what kind of gall to have her served at lunch in front of everybody. By the time she came back from the restroom, Mark had straightened out the mess. He told the VPs that it was an insurance claim. Lily was glad that Mark was there. 3 months later, Lily was sitting in the attorney's office going over the divorce-related paperwork. Ethan wasn't asking her for anything, but Lily found out a few things herself. Well, Ethan's attorney explained, Ethan has sold his company. That got Lily's attention. What? Who did he sell his company to? She demanded. His sister, Sarah. I believe he calmly responded. For how much? She asked. For $2. You will get your check for your share in the mail once the divorce is final. He informed her with a small smirk on his face. How can he do that? She asked her attorney. That company is community property and half of it belongs to me. How dare he? And where is he anyway? Why isn't he here? She continued, her voice getting louder. Ethan's attorney looked at Lily and laughed. Then he picked up his briefcase, handed his card to her attorney, and walked out of the office. About the same time, Ethan was back home at his dad's old house in Bells, listening to an offer for the property. Since his dad had passed away, the farm belonged to him and Sarah. There was a rumor going around that Nissan would be opening a plant in Tennessee somewhere. An executive VP in charge of development from Nissan was talking to Ethan about building the plant in Bells, on Ethan and Sarah's property. The farm was a little over 200 acres, so it was the size that Nissan had been looking for. That, combined with its easy access to the freeway, and the fact that a railroad line already existed on one side of the land, made it the perfect location. Everyone in the town understood the stakes involved, because Nissan building the new assembly plant in Bells would also draw other businesses into the area. Ethan and Sarah agreed to the deal with a $35 million price to be split between the two of them. Nissan even signed a 6-year deal with Sarah's firm to provide consulting services. Ethan asked the VP, after they had signed off on the land deal, "What are your plans? Now that you have sold your business, I haven't really thought about what I am going to do for the immediate future, to be honest." "Why do you ask?" "Ethan, we at Nissan have done our due diligence, and that included researching your background. We were wondering if you might be interested in becoming the new head of accounting for the plant." "I think that I might be very interested. Of course, I would have to look over the whole package that Nissan offers, but my inclination is to say yes," Ethan agreed. In the meantime, Lily and Mark had gotten a tip that Nissan was building a plant in Bells. Lily and Mark envisioned themselves as Bells' new power couple. But for that to happen, Lily needed to be divorced. She decided to accept Ethan's settlement and put a rush on the divorce. She asked her attorney to push it through the court system as fast as he could, and 45 days later, Lily and Ethan were divorced. A week after the divorce was final, Lily married Mark in a small ceremony at a wedding chapel in Las Vegas. Ethan heard about it through the grapevine, and while he frowned, he didn't say a thing about it to anyone. Ethan started at the new Nissan factory, where he put in his usual 110% effort. Plant management recognized talent when they saw it, and in what seemed like no time at all, Ethan was promoted to VP of Finance and Administration, which included the HR department. Ethan directly reported to the executive VP of the region, a longtime Nissan employee, Alex Brown. Alex liked Ethan's no-nonsense management style. It was 2 years after his divorce, and Ethan was doing very well. He was good at his job and enjoyed it. He had been very pleased with how his relationship with his boss, Alex Brown, had developed. They had a great deal of mutual respect and had become close to each other, each relying on the other's judgment. When Alex had asked Ethan if he could come by his office, Ethan had no idea of what to expect. He was even more surprised when Alex explained to him that Nissan had purchased the department store chain, whose headquarters were based close to Bells, to keep it open and viable. Alex explained the situation and asked Ethan to evaluate the new business, paying special attention to headquarters personnel and payrolls. Alex took the information back to his office, where they performed a detailed analysis. Then they assembled a set of recommendations to present to Alex. The bottom line was that, to stop the financial bleeding of the business, they would need to let go of about 10% of the people in management and nearly 15% of the hourly labor force. After Alex had received Ethan's plan, it was time for the bad news to be given to management. Alex had all the managers come to the staging area, where they had folding chairs set up. At the front were a pair of large tables on either side of a podium. Lily and Mark were hoping that they could talk to Alex alone before the reorganization was announced, but Alex asked them to wait for Ethan. Alex never mentioned Ethan's last name, so when it was Ethan Miller, Lily's ex, who walked in, Lily and Mark almost shit themselves. They were in shock. Alex couldn't help but notice the look on Lily and Mark's faces. He said something in Japanese to Ethan, who laughed and replied in Japanese as well. Lily had no idea Ethan knew any other languages. After all, Ethan was a simpleton, right? She was bright enough to know that the fact that he was talking to management sent to this country from Nissan Japan in Japanese was a bad sign, at least for her and Mark. Alex introduced Ethan to the gathered managers as the head of administration, which included both the HR and accounting departments. Lily sat there, dumbfounded. When did this happen? When did Ethan become the man? Where was she when this happened? Oh yeah, she was getting screwed by Mark. Lily was so deep in thought that Mark had to elbow her to get her attention. At that point, Ethan was explaining why, if they were laid off, they would not be getting severance packages. This was a surprise for Lily and Mark as well as the other middle managers, because they knew that when the owners and top management sold the company to Nissan, they left with golden parachutes for themselves. But at this point, there was no money left in the business. In fact, Nissan was having to make major cash infusions just to keep the doors open. So most laid-off managers could expect only state unemployment compensation, which was a pittance. Ethan also warned the middle managers about the upcoming cutbacks and how he and Alex had decided to cut 25% of middle management rather than downsizing the labor force. When Ethan had finished with his presentation, Alex announced that HR would be speaking with each manager individually, and then they would determine who they would keep. They would be informed of when and where the interviews would take place, but they were being held ASAP. As Ethan was leaving, Lily tried to get his attention, but he just walked out talking to Alex. He never even looked her way. Holy shit, Mark turned and said to Lily. Holy shit is right, she replied. And this is a discharge, it will state. She added with a worried look on her face. Meaning? Mark asked. Lily looked at Mark, wondering how he could have reached his position and still know so little about business. Meaning they can fire us for any reason, or no reason at all, Lily explained. Mark looked at Lily and thought for a minute. Lily, he said, you're gonna have to get back on the country bumpkin's good side. Lily looked at him like he was crazy. And how, pray tell, am I supposed to do that? I don't know, Mark shrugged. You're the one who screwed him over, you're the one who has to fix it. Hell, screw him if you have to. Shouldn't be any big deal. You screwed him for years while you were married. But understand something, we have a mortgage on the house and we've got bills to pay. If either one of us is fired, we will be in deep financial trouble. Shit, and we don't even get the severance pay package that they promised. Those bastards. Lily looked at Mark but didn't say anything. This was just another instance when Lily felt like a hooker. Over the past few years of their marriage, if Mark needed to get someone on board one of Mark's money-making schemes, Mark would just pimp her out like a piece of meat. And when Mark wanted sex, he would just take it. He treated her as if she was his property. Lily and Mark's appointment was set for that Saturday. They followed the directions that had been provided and found themselves at a 25-acre ranch. As they drove into the driveway and up to the house, Lily and Mark concluded that Alex must be loaded. When they rang the bell, this cute little southern belle answered the door. Hi, y'all, she said with the most charming southern accent. My name is Emma, and please come in. Make yourselves at home. Once inside, they were in awe. The house looked like one of those mansions on lifestyles of the rich and famous. As they moved further into the mansion, they saw coworkers walking around, exploring the house. Most of them were having a ball. Some of them knew it would be their last days working for the company, but it was a party. The smell of barbecue permeated the house. Lily and Mark noticed Alex and made a beeline right for him. Lily said, Sir, this is just a wonderful home you have. Alex laughed at her compliment. Oh no, Alex corrected them. This isn't my house. Right then, Ethan walked up and glanced briefly at them before he turned and spoke to Alex in Japanese again. Lily became very nervous when Ethan seemed to look right through her, not even acknowledging her presence. Ethan, what did you just say? Lily asked, miffed a little at Ethan's minor impoliteness. It was Alex, though, who responded. He asked me if I liked the house. If it's not yours, then whose house is this? Lily asked because she knew that there was no way in hell this big-ass house belonged to Ethan. It belongs to Ethan, of course. Alex replied with what some might interpret as a slightly malicious grin on his face. Just then, Emma walked up. Ethan, can you tell Jeff to go to the wine cellar and bring up about 30 more bottles of wine and 5 more cases of beer? Ethan nodded in agreement and walked over to the intercom and started issuing instructions. Emma, you've done a wonderful job of redesigning the house, Alex remarked. Why, thank you, Alex. You're so sweet. And did you like the new pool that we put in? Alex and Emma headed out to the pool with Lily and Mark tagging along close behind. When they walked outside, they couldn't believe their eyes. There was a lap pool, an Olympic-sized pool in a grotto. Emma, Alex asked, if I'm not being too nosy, can I ask how much did the house cost? Around $4 million, Emma told him in a very factual manner, and the house Sarah lives in was around $1.5 million. Oh, that reminds me, Alex continued. How is Sarah doing? Sarah just had another baby about a month ago, and she is so adorable. Every time I see Sarah's baby, I tell Ethan we need to start working on getting me pregnant too. Just then, Ethan walked up in time to hear her last remark. He playfully smacked her on the butt. Baby, we'll get you knocked up soon enough. But right now, we need more us time. The rest of the evening, Lily walked around with a stick up her butt. She had done okay, but her ex, Ethan, had turned out great. Why didn't I see this coming? I was not stupid, but come on. Now he has everything I wanted, she thought to herself bitterly. Mark, on the other hand, was having a ball. He was flirting with every woman in sight, but he had his eyes on Emma. Emma was at the table eating when Mark walked up. Mark flirted and Emma flirted right back. But when Mark touched Emma, he made the wrong choice, and Emma slapped the shit out of him. Mark got pissed and was about to hit her when Ethan walked up. Mark looked Ethan right in the eye and told him, "Why don't you walk away before you get your whipped?" Mark got his butt kicked by screwing with the wife of a jealous man. Needless to say, Mark didn't have a good night. When the job cuts were announced, surprisingly Lily and Mark's names weren't on the list. But they did have to take a small cut in pay. A year later, Emma finally got what she wanted. Twin girls, and a couple of years after that, a little boy who looked just like Ethan. Mark and Lily got divorced a year after that. Mark came home one night with a few guys from work. They screwed Lily for over 4 hours. Lily overheard Mark telling the guys, "She was a 304 when I met her. So why stop now?" When Mark woke up, Lily was gone. Lily left Mark a note. All it said was, "I left him for you." Mark didn't care about Lily leaving, because to him, she'd never been anything but a 304 anyway. 1 month later, Mark was found dead in his bathtub, with both wrists cut open to the bone. Next to him were test results showing that he was HIV positive. Lily ended up working in one of the company stores on the West Coast. She wanted to see Ethan to apologize before she left. But when Lily saw Ethan playing in the yard with his beautiful young wife and his children, she just got back in her car and drove away. Lily cried for many days to come. Many years later, Lily was reading an article as she lay in her hospital bed. She didn't have HIV, but she did have cancer. She was on chemo, but it wasn't working. It was a feature article on CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies. Lily was about Ethan, Emma, their 5 kids and 15 grandkids. The closest Lily got to finding another man like Ethan was the cat she named after him. Now start next story. Hi everyone. How long have you been intimate with him? I asked, as the chaos swirled around us. Margot stared at me, as tense and on edge as a cat meeting another cat in an alleyway. Her eyes darted here, there, and everywhere. "Why did you hit that man?" she shouted. She needed to be heard over the noise of people excitedly swirling around to take a look at the man on the floor, and me, the guy who put him there because he told me he was intimate with you. I didn't feel the need to let him get away with it. But he never said a word to you. I sighed. It seemed we were going to have to go all around the houses to get to the truth on this. I took her arm and drew her out onto the balcony. The view out over the city was good, but my attention was elsewhere. "Johnny, what's this all about? You just stood up and hit Frederick for no reason. Damn it. Why won't she allow me a level of intellect that understands signals and not just words? It wasn't for no reason. I'm not some psycho who goes around hitting strangers for no reason whatsoever. I told you it was for being intimate with you, my less than faithful wife." She turned the tap on, blubbering through the tears. "How can you say that? How dare you? I have never." I cut her off. "Yes, you have, and lying to me now isn't going to make anything easier. So why don't we just let it all out and hopefully feel better about this **T storm you've dragged me into? Why would you say that? I've always been completely honest and true." "Stop it," I shouted. "I've known you've been stepping out on me for weeks now. I just didn't know the who of it until tonight, until that **T told me." But he never said a word. He didn't. But he still said it just as clear as day. "I don't understand," she wailed. "I was gonna have to wait around anyway, until the emergency services turned up. Police, ambulance, and maybe even the fire brigade or even the army. It all depended on who had been called, so we might as well get through it." I told her to wait there, putting enough sternness into my voice that I knew she would comply, and went to get us drinks from our table, and that lovely little cigar case that had the cutter and lighter built in from the suit jacket I'd hung on the back of my chair. I loved that case just as much as I loved its contents, had done ever since Margot had given it to me for my birthday the previous year, when she had been promoted to department manager shortly after that. I had bought her a lovely sapphire and emerald pendant. We liked giving each other things we had extensively and exhaustively searched out. When I returned, she had sunk into one of the metal wire chairs that dotted the hotel balcony, which ran alongside the conference room her company had booked for the evening's award ceremonies. As I pulled up another of those monstrosities and sat down beside her, she tried to get started. "Johnny," I raised a finger at her, signaling her to wait. Then I drew out a cigar, clipped it, and lit it. When it was glowing nicely, I turned to her. "You've been messing around on me for the past 3 weeks, maybe more, probably more. You thought you were hiding it, but you weren't. It was your stories that gave you away." She looked incredulous. "What do you mean, my stories? What are you talking about?" I gave a ruefully bitter laugh. "The stories you and your women friends tell when we all get together. We were still quite young, had been married 6 years with Bethy, our daughter, and had a lot of friends who were very much like us. Yuppies, I suppose, is the best word, although I don't like thinking I am one. So every weekend, we would all hang out at one or other of our homes, or head to the lake or park for a barbecue and drinks. And in the natural course of things that always seems to happen at these get-togethers, the men would slowly congregate together in one group and the women in another, and each would regale the others in the group with stories about their partners. The men would basically bring each other up to date on what was going on in their lives. Conversations they'd had with their wives, decisions made, plans put together for future vacations or places they discovered that their children might like. Then the conversation would swing away to business, politics, and of course sport, with little byways into remembering when trying to make each story more interesting or funny than the previous speaker. We all had pretty good senses of humor, and blasts of laughter would foghorn from the men's group at regular intervals. And the women would do the same, except their conversations seemed set at a much more basic level than ours. There were no fixed rules or even conscious decisions about when and how the groups would form, and people would split away to chat with people in the other group all the time, reminding a partner of something they had just thought of, telling a tidbit of gossip just heard that was too good to wait until the trip home, or just for a hug and a squeeze of a hand. It's just how people are when they get together. The thing is, I'd hung out near the women's group often enough that I knew the topics of conversation would usually be about husbands, children, homes, or something newly purchased. Hell, that was what the men covered as well, among other things. But the tone was very different. The women in our circle of friends would start off casually, gossiping about what was going on in their lives, which would gradually morph into what their husbands were doing, and then change further into what their husbands were doing wrong. When it came to things they did wrong, husbands were the preferred topic, even beating out how horrendous their children's moods, untidiness, and eating habits were as the greatest source of merriment. It would start lightly, with a little emphasis here and there when describing something a husband had done, causing much hilarity amongst them. Then it would quickly become a competition to one-up each other about how awful their husbands were, and how badly they screwed things up. Each story would be interrupted by screeches of laughter at a mean comment that one of them would chip in, and the mood would seem to get even nastier as each new rack on tour took up a tale. Thank God for children, as it was usually they who would interrupt the group's toxic conversation. Kids complaining about each other, crying over a fall or scrape, or whining for something to put in their mouths. Hey, I'm not moaning about the kids, they were just doing what kids do. I know now that this is not an unusual state of affairs when women get together. Hell, even I think that quite a few husbands are absolute jerks who don't deserve the wife they have. So the conversations are a way of lowering tension in the women and allowing them to vent in a passive-aggressive way which they can blow off as just having a laugh. But the first time I heard it ramp up the way it always does took me completely by surprise. I was in the kitchen checking the marinade on the steak and chops and could hear the women chatting in the lounge. There was a burst of laughter that brought a smile to my face, and I began to consciously listen in. May was having a go at Dom, who, according to her, always tries to score some three-pointer by throwing his socks at the laundry basket from his side of the bed. He even tries to do trick shots by making them spin in the air, idiot stuff like that, like there's some crowd watching and cheering him on. Hey, at least he tries for the basket, moaned Danny. Greg just drops them on the floor as if the act of taking them off makes them non-existent. They exist when I have to pick them up to do the laundry, that's for sure. I don't even mind that, interrupted Freddie. What I object to is the skid marks and the fact that Vern always manages to turn his boxers inside out when he takes them off and I have to turn them right side out again to wash. I don't even want to look at that, and I still have to turn them right side out with my hands. Can you believe it? I couldn't help having a silent snigger at the hapless Vern and his careless toilet habits. He always tried to come across as the macho man, and now Georgina chipped in. Pete balls his undies up if they have skid marks in them and then tucks them into his socks, so I have to pull them out again to wash. They are the undies with minions on them, asked Reggie. Oh, now he has more new ones with the Avengers on. Georgina came back. Iron Man, sniggered Freddie. Actually, I think it's a male version of Elastigirl, Georgina said, straight-faced. The laughter from the whole group was almost deafening. Wow, she just dumped Pete into the garbage disposal of female opinion with that remark, and they just got worse and worse as the conversation went on. Everything from Pete's apparently limped noodle to Stan's fumble flirting with women and Dom's fat belly, which by all accounts needed a corset or even more appropriately a bustier, were torn apart for their amusement. Every husband with a wife in the group took more than one tank buster during that conversation, and I didn't think Dom was much overweight at all. It actually shocked me. I thought these women were happy to be married to their men, yet here they were in some sort of unacknowledged competition to make their husbands the very worst man in their whole circle of friends. Sure, there was lots of laughter going on, but it seemed at the very least to be disloyal and at worst outright sneering derision. How could they stand going home with their spouse thinking the way they did? Even if they didn't mean it, damn, at a minimum it was cruel. There was no respect to parent. Luckily for me, Margot didn't take part in these discussions. She would dip into it when passing by but would wave and smile when encouraged to sit in with them until 3 weeks ago. We were at Klaus and Ingrid's house, and as I was passing the lounge window I saw Margot sitting in the group, wine in hand and laughing hard, both puzzled and curious. I entered the house and remained out of sight. There was the normal complaining about the husband's habits and nasty desires, each in turn having to outdo the previous offerings. Then I heard Margot chip in, I know all about that, the noises that Johnny makes when he flosses his teeth. I heard her make noises as if she was throwing up, sneezing, humming the theme from Frozen, and gargling all at the same time. I felt my face grow heated. I think that's the noise. When we made love last night, giggled Freddie, the last true romantic. Not a chance, laughed Margot. My husband is way more romantic. When Johnny finishes it sounds like a vet just stuck his arm up inside a cow without any warning. She giggled loudly. No smooth talk or dinner, just womb-chortled Annie. Not even a flower in sight, Margot finished. There was a delighted howl of laughter. I moved on. I didn't want to listen to any more of that. If there's one person who knows how I sound when I finish, it's me. There wasn't a single note of truth in what she just said. When I come, I don't yell or bray or anything the women had come up with. I let out a series of long, low sighs as if experiencing an expected pain, like when a doctor carries out an extended check on your sprained knee and it hurts, although you're braced for it. I didn't want to cause a fight in front of our friends, so I stayed cool but not unresponsive for the rest of the day. We got home after a day of wine and sun, and after putting 3-year-old Bethy to bed, just hit the sack and went straight to sleep. But that sound kept echoing in my mind, and it promised to hang about unless I worked it all out. The next day was Monday, so I called Henning Meritz in HR and invited him to lunch on my expense account. Henning was German by birth and was unfortunately true to the largely false caricature of the lack of humor of his nation, but he was very intelligent and more importantly had studied psychology at university before going on to major in personnel management. I understand. You call on the German about such an emotional wound because you know we are such an emotional people, he said, his voice overly accented after I explained what I had heard. I stared at him blankly. Yeah, that was a joke, he said after a moment of silence in his normal voice. Sorry, I said. I'm used to it, so what do you want me to advise you about? I want to ask why women would do that. Why would my wife do that and lie about me? He chewed his lip and perused the lunch menu. You know, I subscribed to the philosophy of sexual economics. I did. He had explained the theory one evening at a boring work conference. So in my view, she is joining this group to denigrate husbands for one of three reasons. Which one I can't tell without interviewing her. Which I presume you don't want me to do. I shook my head. I didn't need her telling the witch's circle about that as well. I would drop to the very bottom of the league table of husbands if she related that. The first and most obvious is that she feels separated from the group of women in your circle. She feels she needs to reconnect and is willing to throw your reputation to the wolves in order to do that. I nodded. I had already thought about that, but taking into account that we had been having these get-togethers with our group for years, I couldn't see why she would suddenly have that need. Secondly, you may have wounded her with something you have or haven't done. And this is a passive-aggressive way of getting even with you. I nodded. What man ever knew what women got pissed off about? Until she finally, sometimes after years, revealed the truth about some horrendous crime you had committed. I decided to think about that further and examine my memory about anniversaries. Casual remarks I may have made, or worst of all, any frantically vital appointments such as a lunch she had vaguely indicated she might want that I had forgotten to turn up for. Thirdly, she may be trying to lower your position in the group in order to raise herself up and achieve sympathy and support for something she plans to do. She wants to get people on her side. Against me, I asked. He shrugged. It wouldn't be the first time, would it? It happens within families all the time, especially between siblings. You know, that is also part of the sexual economic theory. The advancing of oneself at the expense of the other in order to gain resources or genetic material, depending on the sex of the protagonist of this action. In fact, he waffled on and on as we ate, and I remembered all too clearly why I didn't have lunch with him very often. But he had given me plenty to think about. Who's hosting the get-together this weekend? I asked later in the week, carefully casual. I couldn't bear the fallout if she knew my thoughts. I loved her and didn't want to face a month or more of silent accusation if she thought I was falsely accusing her of something. Annie and Greg, she said. That'll be nice. You seem to enjoy getting together with the girls. I do. They're a nice bunch, she agreed. You seem closer than you have been for a while. Yes, I don't know why it's taken me so long to relax into their company. I thought about that. Could it be because they seem to be awful human beings with no loyalty, respect, or high opinion for anyone? How could anyone relax in their company? After my wake-up call about the girls, I had taken to listening to their group conversations, and if one of them was absent, they would be ripped to pieces by the rest like a wounded and bleeding fish in the center of a shiver of sharks in a feeding frenzy. Henning had explained that as well. Women do gossip more than men, and as they mostly issue violence, this is one of the main weapons in their arsenal. Men are hunters by nature while women are gatherers. Nuts, seeds, and berries are good, but nowhere near as rich in nutrition as meat. So they are programmed to want the resources that men are traditionally better at bringing home. In return, they can offer intimacy and exclusivity, something that usually has no value when offered by men. A woman has to advertise herself to men, hence the makeup and clothes and all that, in order to compete with other attractive women. The other way to compete is through gossip, which is basically talking about another woman and the value of her sexual ability or exclusivity while raising those values in herself at the same time. So, a woman hinting that another woman is a.s**** is a genetic weapon. Of course, why don't they just come out and accuse each other of being that, I asked. 1, because that would devalue the denigration. It's a potent weapon and has to be used sparingly. And 2, because first-hand knowledge would place her squarely alongside the A.S***** in order to gain the knowledge, and that would lower the value of her own promise of exclusivity, and lowering that even a little could cause her a lot of damage in the genetic stakes. So, gossiping is the answer. Geez, that's messed up. It's the way our monkey brains have been programmed, he said with a smile. But if they know they are all calling each other A.S*****, even just to each other, why don't they call each other out on it? Studies have shown that most women believed that their friends would defend them against such talk. Almost every woman interviewed maintained that she would defend her friends and firmly believed she did not spread any such gossip onwards. And yet, if that was true, there would be no gossip a go around, so I wouldn't take that denial. A face value. He paused to think. Economically, perhaps it's to maintain the price of being exclusive. If a woman does sleep around, it increases the flow of intimacy into the market, which, like any other commodity, lowers the price. If they all did it, then the cost to a man of having intimacy would be almost nothing. He wouldn't have to spend much in the way of resources to get laid. However, if the value of that woman's sexual ability is lowered and the promise of exclusivity is questioned, then that maintains the price for those women who are regarded as virtuous and yet good in bed for one man. He took a drink. Good wine. I muttered something, wishing I'd never asked him about all this. To be seen as purely a provider of resources to a woman, in order to get intimacy and the promise of faithfulness, seemed just so sad. It was the conjunction of those two thoughts that brought up another. Margot had explicitly promised me that she would be faithful to me when we married and implicitly promised to have intimacy with me. At the same time, was I getting neither? I certainly wasn't getting as much intimacy as I was promised. That was for sure. Once a week, maybe. It was once a month more often than I would like to remember. And if that new little nagging voice in the back of my head was right, then I wasn't getting any exclusivity either. In fact, it was more likely that someone else was getting that. So I watched. I wasn't going to fly off the handle. I had no idea if I was right. And if I wasn't, then bringing it up might actually cause something to happen out of anger, more than defuse the situation. I loved my wife, but I wasn't blind to the fact that sometimes she was more than happy to cut off her nose to spite her face. So for almost 4 weeks I observed her. I didn't see much that was interesting, apart from the fact that she was getting her girls on side each weekend with more and more cutting remarks. Then came the awards evening. I looked over all her fellow workers, wondering if there was a sexual aspect seething unseen beneath the surface. Logically, it was the right place to look. She went to work at 8 in the morning, got home at 6. She didn't travel, and there were no girls' nights except on her birthday, when she and a bunch of her girlfriends would head off to a show and a dinner at a fine restaurant. They would stay overnight in shared rooms. But by checking over her Facebook page and looking at the timestamps on all the pics stored in her phone, any lover would have to rush in, be intimate with her, and be cleaned up and gone within 10 minutes. So it wasn't impossible, but it wasn't likely. So where were the men that may have come into her life and inside her? At work. Where else? For some reason, perhaps because I was looking for a cheating asked so intently, or maybe because of the stupid Zapata mustache that he wore that was 50 years out of date, I picked up on him straight away, glad-handing and joking with people he worked his way towards our table. When he reached us, he greeted other people before saying hi to Margot. Their eyes locked and they gave each other a slight smile. Then he smiled at me and the corner of his mouth crept up just slightly into a sneer. As he looked at me, his right hand reached up to his left shoulder, flicking at something with 2 fingers, 2 flicks. That was all. But it told me all I needed to know. He was letting me know that I was just a bug in his life, something that he could brush away with contempt. I stood up, leaned over, and punched the left side of his face as hard as I possibly could. I'm no fighter and I don't have the arms of a Superman, but it was a good punch. He went down hard. And that's when the hysteria started. People getting all excited because something different had happened in their lives. And it hadn't happened to them. So they could enjoy it all guilt-free, which made them all run around making way too much noise. Margot had thought she was getting away scot-free with having an affair, and it had turned on its head in exactly the wrong place at the wrong time. The upper echelons of her company was mostly female, following the growing trend. But despite their earnings, they still could only offer intimacy and exclusivity to the men in their lives when they had one. So having one cheater exposed so openly made them all afraid that their men might care to re-examine that half of what they offered to a partner. She wasn't going to be flavor of the month for a long time. Those stories you started sharing with your girl buddies. You know, the ones where you get to lie about all the bad habits I have and how your life is wild. I'm still around. Those are what told me. The sheer disrespect you managed to come up with is actually quite mind-boggling. The sheer inventiveness of those lies makes me think you should become a fantasy author. Was that to get the girls on your side when you left me? She shook her head, and then nodded. Yes, she whispered. So you were going to leave me, I stated. My life was a bowl of and it was the only thing to eat in the kitchen. I wasn't sure, she said. She was still crying. But she was no coward and looked me in the eye. I was afraid. I frowned. Of me? Are you serious? You thought I would harm you? She shook her head vigorously. I felt a teardrop land on the back of my hand and had to fight the urge to wipe it off at all costs. The cold liquid felt like frozen betrayal. No, I never thought that. You would never hurt me. I was afraid of being alone. So you did the one thing that would ensure it. That doesn't make sense. Besides, you had Mr. 70 Mustache to keep you from being lonely. You were preparing yourself to transit from me to him in real comfort. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. No, it wasn't like that. I knew he wasn't a keeper after the first time. Took a long time before I could commit to that. First time, and afterward, well, the deed had been done. I had become a cheater, what I had always despised. So what did it matter if I kept doing it even with someone I didn't even like much? I just wanted to get out of being married. I was so tired of having to take 3 people into consideration whenever I wanted to do something. I could never do anything spontaneously anymore. You managed to spontaneously end our marriage, I said, carefully showing no expression. Who was this woman? And what had she done with the gentle, loving girl I had married? Yea, for me, she said sadly. Of course, what you could have done is say, Johnny, you're a piss-poor husband and I don't want to be married to you any longer. I've been to a lawyer and in 6 months, I'll be free to be intimate with Mexican Mustache whenever I want. You could have done that. You didn't have to cheat on me. I told you I was afraid. I wanted to get out, but I was afraid of being alone. Well done, Margot. You don't want me and you don't want him, so you just signed up for immersion therapy. Now you can get over your fears by living it. It will be expensive but worth it, I suppose. You earn more than me and you know I'll look after Bethy way better than you anyway. So your spouse will support and child payments won't be cheap, but hey, at least you get what you want. She pressed her lips together and nodded. And so our marriage ended on that note, while the little voices in my head were shouting that they had to know more details, more about who and why and how, when and how many times, and was his Johnson that much bigger? In the end, the voices simply chorused that the woman had cheated. There should at least be more punishment. I had an idea. One demand I will make. You go to our friends and you tell them that everything you said about me was bullish **t and you were lying to make yourself some sort of martyr when you moved out. Okay, I can do that. She sighed. You lied about me, and the sheer scale of the disrespect was eye-watering. Yes, it was. I'm so sorry about that. I felt trapped in a situation I had caused and couldn't see a clear way out. You heard it all. I nodded grimly. She put her hand on mine for a moment. I'm sorry about that. You didn't deserve it, and I did make it all up. You were a good husband. Just not for me. I sighed. Everything was happening so quickly. I didn't have any control at all. I was in a speeding car with no brakes and the steering wheel had come off in my hands. I had no experience of how to handle this. It's not every day that you go to a party married and still be at that party when you're suddenly single with a little girl to care for on your own. Not many how-to books cover that topic. You know those errors are gonna slag you off every which way for years to come? I know. I guess I deserve it. You were right. I should have divorced you first. You thought of where you're going to go? I asked. I was going to find somewhere soon, but her hands waved loosely at the hubbub that was still going on inside. I guessed that she would be facing some very tough questions from senior management. I wondered if she'd still be employed. I guess it depended on what level of position Monsieur Mustache Bandit held. Jesus, Margot, how did you let it all get to this? What happened to the girl I married? She was smart and knew exactly what she wanted as well as being beautiful and kind, loyal and in love with me. Where did she go? She actually thought about that for a while. I guess she became a manager and took that to heart to replace the things she was throwing away. Margot, I love you. Loved you. But I don't want to be in your company anymore. I'm going to wait outside and see if the police turn up. If they take me in, please bail me out in the morning. You owe me that much. Okay, Johnny. She did bail me out, and that was the last time I saw my wife. When I did see her, the divorce was final. She was no longer my wife. She was someone else's problem now. I had a wife. I had a woman I loved with all my heart. A woman I had promised myself to and looked forward to growing old with. She had discovered she didn't love me anymore and cheated so that she didn't have to face me until the very end. That's how I saw it. She did the crime and I paid for it. I faced loneliness and heartbreak, the gradual recovery from that and the more than hesitant search for someone to take her place, mistrusting all women from here on. It wasn't going to be easy, especially with a demanding 3-year-old golden-haired enchantress to take care of. Margot had damaged me badly, but I wasn't down and out for the count. I thought about Henning and his sexual economics. I wondered whether being known as a cheating woman would lower her price over much.